Rain hammered the windows of Ashcombe Hall, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of greys and greens. Within the faded grandeur of the drawing room, Lady Evelyn Ashcombe sat rigidly in an armchair, her pale hands folded in her lap. The fire snapped, but its warmth scarcely touched her. She stared at the painter before her, Monsieur Leclerc, his brush poised mid-air, as if awaiting permission to capture the secrets behind her eyes. "Hold just so, mademoiselle," he murmured, his accent softening the sharpness of his words. He studied her with a gaze both respectful and searching, as if he might uncover in her countenance some ancient sorrow. Evelyn did not flinch. She wore her melancholy as another might don a silk shawl, habitually, almost elegantly. She was aware of the peeling wallpaper behind her, the threadbare carpet beneath her feet, and the echo of footsteps that passed all too rarely down the once grand corridors. Above the mantel, the Ashcombe crest stared back at her, a reminder of better days. Her father, the Earl, seldom left his study. Her younger siblings whispered of creditors and the future in voices tinged with dread. Leclerc's brush flicked, capturing the tilt of her chin. "You are most patient, Lady Evelyn, but I sense a restlessness, an untold story." She met his gaze, her dark eyes unwavering. "One must be patient, monsieur, when one's choices are limited." He smiled, a sad knowing curve of his lips. "Even a caged bird may sing." Their conversation was interrupted by Lady Ashcombe's entrance, her footsteps brisk, her smile tight. "Evelyn, do not frown. You know how important this portrait is. Lord Bertram is due to call next week, and he will wish to see you at your best." Evelyn's fingers curled imperceptibly. She replied, "Of course, Mamma." Lady Ashcombe's gaze swept over her daughter, assessing, worrying. "Monsieur Leclerc, you will paint her with more color in her cheeks, yes? A touch more vitality?" "But, Madame, it is her soul I wish to paint." Leclerc replied gently. "Her soul will not save this family," Lady Ashcombe said, her voice sharp as frost. She swept from the room, leaving the faint scent of lavender and desperation in her wake. Evelyn's composure crumbled for a moment. She glanced at Leclerc, her voice low. "My mother wishes to barter me for the family's salvation. Lord Bertram is not a man I would choose." Leclerc dabbed at his palate, his eyes kind. "And what would you choose, Lady Evelyn?" She hesitated. The rain outside grew fiercer, as if urging her to speak. "Freedom. To make my own fate, not simply to rescue my father's debts." "Then that must be your story," he murmured. Far across England, another storm brewed. In the shadowed halls of Ravenshire, Alexander, Duke of Ravenshire, stood before a shrouded window, his reflection fractured by the rain. Vienna's glittering world of alliances and secrets was behind him. Ahead lay the echoing emptiness of a home changed by death. His elder brother's portrait hung above the hearth, the paint not yet dulled by time. His mother, the Dowager Duchess, entered, regal in mourning. "You have been away too long, Alexander. The estate requires your attention. The dukedom cannot wait." He turned, the weight of duty etched into his features. "I know, mother." She approached, her hand light on his arm. "You are alone, my son. It is time you thought of marriage." He stiffened, his voice barely a whisper. "For the dukedom. For yourself as well." Her eyes softened, but her words were iron. "You cannot carry all of this alone." Alexander looked past her, through the rain-blurred glass, to the wild sweep of moorland beyond. He felt every ounce of loneliness and expectation, every shadow that had followed him from Vienna to Hampshire. He wondered, not for the first time, if he would ever find a woman who would see beyond the title to the man beneath. The storm raged on, drawing a line between two lives, Evelyn's, bound by duty and longing, and Alexander's, haunted by loss and expectation. Somewhere in the downpour, their fates edged closer, as inevitable as thunder after lightning. In the Ashcombe drawing room, Monsieur Leclerc dipped his brush in ochre, capturing the faintest glimmer of hope in Evelyn's eyes. She sat straighter, as if preparing for a journey she had not yet begun. A distant bell tolled, marking the hour. Evelyn's heart beat in time, restless, waiting. She did not yet know that everything was about to change. The dazzling chandeliers of Sotheby's cast fractured light across a throng of London's elite, their laughter and whispers rising and falling like the tide. Alexander, Duke of Ravenshire, moved through the gilded crowd with the ease of a man accustomed to both scrutiny and solitude. He had come for the rare books, an illuminated Chaucer, a folio of Spenser, but as he passed beneath a crimson-draped archway, his attention snared on something wholly unexpected. There, propped on a velvet-draped easel, was a portrait. The brushwork was luminous, the subject startlingly alive. A young woman, her face poised between hope and heartbreak. Her eyes, deep and dark, seemed to hold secrets he had carried all his life. Alexander found himself transfixed, unable to look away. The label read simply, "Portrait of a Lady," by Leclerc, sitter unknown. A discreet cough at his shoulder. "Your Grace," murmured his secretary, "the book lots are due to begin." "Not yet," Alexander replied, his voice distant. "This painting, who is she?" The secretary glanced at the catalogue. "There is no name, only that the artist is Leclerc, a Frenchman of some reputation." Alexander's gaze lingered on the portrait. The young woman's expression was one he recognized, the ache of longing, the dignity of sorrow. He wondered who had abandoned her likeness to be sold to the highest bidder. A ripple of excitement moved through the room as the auctioneer rapped his gavel. "Lot 24, a work by Monsieur Leclerc. Note the delicate execution, the rare vitality in the sitter's eyes. What shall I say to open?" The bidding began briskly. An earl with a taste for the continental, a merchant's wife, a viscountess rumored to collect sad-eyed beauties, they all vied for the painting. Alexander felt his pulse quicken, a sensation both foreign and undeniable. 500 guineas, he called, surprising himself with the urgency in his voice. The crowd murmured, eyes flicking between the Duke and the painting. The merchant's wife upped the ante, her smile arch. 600. Alexander's jaw tightened. 700. A hush fell. The auctioneer's hammer hovered. No further advance? Sold to the Duke of Ravenshire. As the room erupted in whispers, Alexander stood motionless. He felt as if he had claimed not a canvas, but a fragment of fate. Collectors eyed him with envy, society matrons with speculation. By evening's end, the city would buzz with rumors, the reserved Duke smitten with a nameless muse. Later, as his carriage rattled through rain-slicked streets, Alexander sat opposite the painting, his gloved hand tracing the rim of its gilt frame. "Who are you?" he murmured. "What sorrow lives behind those eyes?" Within the stately, time-worn walls of Ravenshire House, the Dowager Duchess awaited her son's return. She was a formidable figure, her will undimmed by years or grief. When Alexander entered, bearing the painting with a strange reverence, she rose from her chair. "What is this, Alexander? You have never before brought home such decorations." He set the portrait gently on the sideboard. "I saw her. I could not leave her behind." The dowager regarded the painting, her brow furrowing. "It is a fine work, certainly. But the girl is a stranger. Will you now haunt auction rooms for phantoms?" "She is not a phantom." His voice was low, almost defensive. "She is real. I feel as if I have known her always." His mother's eyes narrowed, sharp with both curiosity and concern. "The house is already thick with memories, my son. Do not invite more ghosts." Alexander said nothing, but that night, as London's fog pressed against his windows, he studied the portrait by candlelight. He scrutinized the delicate brushstrokes, the subtle play of shadow and light, searching for some clue. He dispatched a letter to Leclerc's agent, requesting all he could learn of the painting's origins. Days later, the reply arrived. Commissioned by a lady in Hampshire, sitter unnamed, artist now in Paris. The answer brought no peace. If anything, it deepened the mystery and the pull. Far from London's glitter, Bath's cobbled streets echoed with rain and the clatter of carriages. In a modest boarding house on Royal Crescent, Evelyn Ashcombe sat at a battered pianoforte, her back straight, her hands poised. 3 young girls huddled around her, their faces expectant. "Begin again, Miss Ashcombe," asked the youngest, her voice timid. Evelyn smiled, gentle but worn. "Once more, from the beginning, Alice," with feeling. Her life had narrowed since her father's death. The Earl had gone quietly, his debts less so. The grand rooms of Ashcombe Hall were shuttered, her mother and siblings scattered among distant relations. Evelyn, her dowry vanished and her prospects dim, had come to Bath to teach music and French to the daughters of the modestly fortunate. She bore her gentility like a faded ribbon visible, but threadbare. After the lesson, she lingered at the window, watching the drizzle blur the outlines of the city. Her thoughts drifted to a world of gardens and candlelit balls, a world she had once inhabited. Now her days were measured by the clink of coins and the patience of strangers. A sharp knock sounded. Mrs. Beckwith, the landlady, appeared, waving a letter. "Post for you, Miss Ashcombe." Evelyn took it, heart fluttering with hope. But it was only a note from her mother, written in a thin, anxious hand. News of her brother's apprenticeship, prayers for better fortune, a veiled entreaty that Evelyn might soon find a post with better pay. She folded the letter, pressing it to her lips. In the silence that followed, the memory of sitting for Monsieur Leclerc drifted back, his quiet encouragement, the sense of being truly seen. She wondered what had become of the portrait he had promised to return, but which had vanished after her father's passing. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, she imagined her painted likeness hanging in some distant gallery, her gaze meeting that of a stranger. London's salons buzzed with speculation. Over tea and cards, the Duke's impulsive purchase was dissected and embroidered. Some said he had fallen under a gypsy's spell, others that he mourned a lost love. The Dowager Duchess fielded inquiries with diplomatic coolness, but in private, her worry grew. "You must not let this obsession consume you, Alexander," she warned. "There are living women of good family and fortune who would gladly accept your hand." He turned from the hearth, the painting's eyes following him. "It is not an obsession. It is curiosity." The dowager pressed her lips together. "A year ago, I urged you to marry for duty. Now I urge you to marry for your own peace. The estate, the title, they need heirs, not ghosts." Alexander offered no reply. His dreams were filled with the portrait, the tilt of her chin, the sorrow in her eyes, the sense of yearning that seemed to mirror his own. He commissioned inquiries in Hampshire, but the trail was cold. Leclerc had left for Paris. The sitter remained unnamed. Yet each evening, he returned to the painting as one might return to a confidant. He spoke aloud to her sometimes, foolishly, hoping for comfort. "Who are you? Where have you gone?" Bath's spring air brought the scent of daffodils and the promise of renewal. Evelyn walked daily to her pupils' houses, her step light despite her circumstances. She found solace in music, in the laughter of children, in the small pride of supporting herself. But sometimes, in the hush between lessons, she felt the ache of loss of home, of family, of a future she could no longer imagine. One afternoon, as she guided Alice's hands through a gentle sonata, the girl looked up at her. "Miss Ashcombe, why are you sad sometimes?" Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Sad? No, not sad. Only thinking of the past." Alice nodded, accepting this with a child's wisdom. "You play beautifully. It makes me happy." Evelyn smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Then I am glad." Across England the portrait hung in the Duke's study, a silent witness to his restlessness. Each day, Alexander's questions grew. Who had she been? What life had she led? Why did her gaze haunt him so? He resolved to travel to Bath, following the faintest trace of Leclerc's commission. Unbeknownst to him, Evelyn's world was about to be upended once again. As dusk settled over Bath and London alike, two lives once distant, now drawn together by art and longing, hovered on the edge of revelation. Fate, it seemed, was not yet finished with either of them. A pale dawn crept across the rooftops of Paris, touching the Seine with trembling gold. Alexander, Duke of Ravenshire, strode through narrow streets, his footsteps echoing between shuttered shops. He carried the ache of sleepless nights, the portrait's haunting gaze imprinted on his mind. The search for the woman had consumed him. His inquiries in Hampshire led only to dead ends and gossip. And so, driven by a need he barely understood, he had crossed the Channel to seek out the artist himself. Monsieur Leclerc's studio was hidden behind a battered blue door in the Marais. Alexander climbed the stairs, the scent of turpentine and old wood sharpening his anticipation. He found Leclerc hunched over a canvas, sunlight striping his hands. The Frenchman looked up, eyes wary. "You have come far, Your Grace." I must know the truth, Alexander replied. The sitter for the portrait, who is she? Leclerc's brush paused in midair. Many wish to know, but I made a promise. Alexander's voice was low, urgent. I mean her no harm. I would only understand. Was she from Hampshire? Leclerc studied him, weighing trust against duty. She was English, yes, noble-born, though pride wounded her more than poverty. After the portrait was finished, she vanished. I have not seen her since. Her name, Monsieur. Leclerc shook his head. I cannot. She asked me to keep her secret. Some stories are not mine to tell. Frustration flared in Alexander's chest. You paint her sorrow so well. Did you not wish for her to be found? I wished for her to be seen. That is different, monsieur. Leclerc's voice softened. If you seek her, seek with gentleness. Alexander left the studio with more questions than answers. Paris receded behind him as he returned to England, the memory of Leclerc's warning echoing in his ears. In Bath, Evelyn stood by the window of her tiny room, watching fog swirl through the crescent. Her mother's latest letter lay open on the table, its words heavy with expectation and fear. Lord Bertram has renewed his offer. He promises security, a home for your sisters. Think of what your refusal means for us all. Evelyn's jaw tightened. The humiliation of Bertram's first proposal, his clumsy insistence, his careless cruelty, still burned in her memory. She pressed her hand to her chest, steadying herself. She would not surrender to desperation, not even for her family's sake. Later that afternoon, her mother's voice trembled with hope and dread as they sat in the parlor of their rented rooms. Evelyn, he is not unfeeling. His fortune is considerable, and you would never want again. Evelyn met her mother's eyes, her voice calm but resolute. I would rather struggle in honesty than live a lie, Mama. I cannot marry Lord Bertram. Her mother's face crumpled, a tear tracing down her cheek. Then what is left for us? Evelyn reached for her mother's hand. We endure. We always have. Word of the Duke's acquisition of the mysterious portrait had spread, whispered through the drawing rooms and auction houses of London. The rumors, embroidered with every telling, spoke of obsession, of a nobleman haunted by a woman he could not name. One grey morning, Evelyn stepped off the coach in London, her heart pounding with a reckless hope. She made her way to the auction house, her gloves worn thin, but her bearing still proud. The reception hall shimmered with wealth and indifference. She slipped through the crowd, searching for a familiar face, a glimpse of her own painted eyes. She paused near a cluster of porters. Their voices drifted toward her. They say the Duke bought it for a fortune, could not bear to let her go to another. Strange, isn't it? No one knows who she is, only that he's searching for her. A thrill of unease ran through Evelyn. She slipped away before anyone could notice her, the knowledge settling on her shoulders like a cloak. Her likeness was no longer hers alone. Had she become nothing but a story for strangers to tell? Alexander's investigation led him to the southern counties, following vague hints and second-hand tales. At an inn outside Bath, he sat across from a merchant's wife who claimed to have seen the portrait. She was teaching music, I believe. Such a refined manner, but dressed plain as a vicar's daughter. Some say she was once Grandon Earl's child, perhaps, but I never learned her name. Alexander's heart hammered. Do you know where she teaches? The woman pursed her lips. Bath, certainly. Perhaps at the Crescent or the Royal School. He pressed a coin into her hand and strode out into the rain. That evening he walked the mist-shrouded streets of Bath, his eyes searching every window, every shadow. He asked after a music teacher, noble-born, with dark eyes and a quiet grace. Some shook their heads, others nodded, pointing him toward the genteel poverty of Royal Crescent. Evelyn finished her last lesson of the day, bidding her pupils farewell as dusk settled over the city. As she gathered her shawl, a sudden knock startled her. Mrs. Beckwith appeared, her face flushed. You have a visitor, Miss Ashcombe. A gentleman, most insistent. Evelyn's breath caught. Did he give his name? No, but he waits in the parlor. Evelyn descended the narrow staircase, her heart thrumming. She entered the parlor to find a tall man standing by the window, his coat dark with rain. his posture tense. He turned, and for a moment she felt the world tilt the eyes that had haunted her dreams, the face she had seen only in memory and rumor. Alexander's voice, when it came, was scarcely more than a whisper. "It is you." Evelyn stood very still, every muscle taut with disbelief. "You are the Duke of Ravenshire." He moved toward her, careful not to startle. "I have searched for you. Ever since I saw your portrait, I—" She interrupted, her voice trembling. "Why? What do you want from me?" He hesitated, struggling for words. "To know you. To understand how a woman with such sorrow could look so proud. I felt as if I knew you before I ever laid eyes on you." Evelyn's composure faltered. "That painting, it was never meant for the world. It was a moment's truth, nothing more." He took another step, his expression raw. "It was hope, Lady Evelyn, not just sorrow." A silence stretched between them, charged and uncertain. Evelyn drew herself up. Dignity hard won. "If you have come for charity, I do not require it. If you have come for curiosity, you will be disappointed." Alexander's lips curved in a faint, rueful smile. "I have come for neither. I have come because I could not help myself." Her heart twisted. For a long moment she gazed at him, the man who had sought her out across countries, the man who held her painted likeness as a talisman. She wondered if destiny was a cruel trick or the beginning of something she dared not name. Outside, the rain intensified, lashing the windows, as if urging them towards some unknown future neither could yet see. In that small candlelit room, fate hovered close enough to touch, but not yet decided. The lamps of Bath flickered gold and trembling in the damp spring dusk, their light spilling across cobblestones alive with carriages and the faint echo of distant laughter. Within the grand rooms of Lady Chudley's townhouse, a crowd assembled. Gentlemen in crisp evening coats, ladies rustling in silk and tulle, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of cut flowers. It was a night for music, gossip, and veiled ambitions, and for one man, a night of quiet, urgent hope. Alexander moved through the candlelit throng with practiced ease, his presence unremarkable beneath the borrowed name, Mr. Ashford. He wore the disguise of anonymity as lightly as a tailored coat, yet inside, his nerves were taut as violin strings. Every step, every glance, was attuned to the possibility of her, the woman in the portrait, the woman whose memory had become a lodestar in his restless soul. The hostess, Lady Chudley herself, greeted him near the staircase. "Ah, Mr. Ashford, a pleasure. I understand you have an appreciation for music. Tonight's program promises to be quite distinguished." Alexander bowed. "I look forward to it, Lady Chudley. Bath's reputation for taste precedes it." She smiled, pleased, and gestured toward the drawing room, where guests gathered in a crescent about a gleaming pianoforte. Alexander's gaze swept the room, heart thudding. And then there she was. Evelyn Ashcombe sat at the instrument, her hands resting lightly on the ivory keys. She wore a gown of deep blue that flattered her pale skin, her hair gathered simply at her nape. As she took her place, the room stilled. With a single breath, she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, like the hush before dawn. Then the melody unfolded, rich and haunting, drawing sorrow and hope from the air itself. Her music was not mere performance. It was confession, memory, and longing woven together. Alexander felt the ache of it in his marrow, the sense that she played not only for the assembled audience, but for herself, her pride, her grief, her secret defiance. When the last notes faded, the room erupted in applause. Evelyn bowed her head in acknowledgement, eyes lowered, cheeks faintly flushed. Alexander's chest tightened. He had imagined her so many times, but nothing had prepared him for the living woman, her dignity, her grace, the storm of emotion she so carefully veiled. Lady Chudley leaned toward her companion. "Such depth for one so young. I do believe Miss Ashcombe feels each note." The companion whispered back, "They say her family was once quite grand. A sad story, if true." Evelyn heard the whispers, but kept her composure. She had become adept at navigating Bath's polite society. The pitying glances, the sly curiosity. Music was her armor, her only claim to a world that had once been hers by right. After the music, The guests dispersed to the card tables and refreshment room. Alexander drifted among them, searching for an opportunity. It came in the form of Mrs. Weatherby, a matron with a fondness for matchmaking and reminiscence. "Mr. Ashford, have you met Miss Ashcombe? She is quite the prodigy." "Not yet, Mrs. Weatherby," Alexander replied, schooling his features into polite interest. "Would you be so kind?" With pleasure, Mrs. Weatherby led him to where Evelyn stood with a cluster of admirers. "Miss Ashcombe, may I introduce Mr. Ashford? He's recently arrived from the north." Evelyn turned, her expression calm and reserved. "Mr. Ashford, I hope you enjoyed the music." He bowed. "Immensely. I have seldom heard such feeling at the pianoforte." "May I ask, do you compose as well as perform?" A faint smile touched her lips. "I find my own compositions rarely please an audience, sir, but the exercise is useful." Alexander inclined his head. "Perhaps it is the audience that must learn to listen differently." There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You flatter me, Mr. Ashford. In Bath, the standard of flattery is rather high." He laughed softly. "Then I will endeavor to be honest instead. I believe you play with both skill and truth." Her gaze sharpened, wary but intrigued. "Truth is not always welcome, in music or in life. Yet it is all that lasts," he replied quietly. A silence stretched between them, charged with something neither could name. Around them, conversation ebbed and flowed, but Evelyn felt the weight of his regard, the steadiness of his attention. She was accustomed to admiration, to the pity of matrons, and the idle curiosity of young men. But this was something different, something that unsettled and compelled her in equal measure. Mrs. Weatherby, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered on. "Miss Ashcombe is much in demand, you know. I dare say she shall be the toast of Bath before the season's end." Evelyn smiled politely, but Alexander saw the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. He resolved to press no further, not tonight. Later, as guests took their leave, Alexander lingered near the vestibule, waiting for a quiet moment. Evelyn emerged, accompanied by her mother, their cloaks drawn tight against the night air. He intercepted them with a deferential bow. "Forgive me, Mrs. Ashcombe, Miss Ashcombe. I hesitate to intrude, but I wish to speak with you privately, if I may." Her mother's eyes widened in surprise, but Evelyn nodded, cautious curiosity in her bearing. "Very well, Mr. Ashford." He lowered his voice, earnest and respectful. "I am hosting a small gathering at my estate just outside Bath in a fortnight. I hope to make music a central part of the evening. Would you consider playing for us? I would, of course, offer suitable remuneration." Evelyn's surprise was immediate, mingled with hesitation. "I am honored, but I am not accustomed to such commissions, sir." He met her gaze with quiet intensity. "You would do me and my guests a great service. Your talent deserves to be heard." Mrs. Ashcombe, sensing opportunity, spoke quickly. "Evelyn, it is a generous offer. You must consider it." Evelyn hesitated, pride and necessity warring within her. She had never played for hire in a private home of such standing. To do so would be to acknowledge her family's fall from grace. Yet the glint of desperation in her mother's eyes, the knowledge of unpaid bills, and a dwindling future pressed upon her. "I will think on it, Mr. Ashford," she said at last, her voice steady. He bowed again, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Miss Ashcombe. I shall send details by post." The following morning, Evelyn sat at her writing desk, her mother pacing the room in anxious hope. "My dear, you must accept. We have little enough as it is. If this Mr. Ashford is truly a gentleman—" Evelyn's pen hovered over the paper. "And if he is not? Mamma, I know nothing of him." Her mother wrung her hands. "He seems respectable, and such an offer. Think what it would mean for us, for your sisters." Evelyn stared out the window, watching the mist unravel above the rooftops. She remembered Alexander's voice, the sincerity in his eyes, the way he had spoken of truth. Something in her had responded, despite herself. Perhaps it was only loneliness, or the ache of being seen. She wrote a brief note of acceptance, her heart heavy with uncertainty. For Alexander, the days passed in restless anticipation. He busied himself with preparations for the ball, his mind never far from the memory of Evelyn's music, her poised reserve. The secrecy of his assumed name weighed on him, but he told himself it was necessary. He wanted to know her as she was, not as the woman in the portrait, not as the object of gossip and speculation. He confided in his friend, Lord Colville, who was in on the ruse. "You are playing a dangerous game, Alexander," Colville remarked one afternoon as they reviewed the guest list. "What if she discovers your true identity?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Then I shall beg her forgiveness. I wish only for a chance to know her, without the shadow of title or fortune." Colville clapped him on the shoulder. "Just be certain you are not deceiving yourself, old friend." On the appointed evening, Evelyn arrived at the estate with her mother, their carriage rattling through iron gates and up a winding drive lined with ancient oaks. The house, though grand, had an air of quiet melancholy, its stone walls softened by ivy and time. Inside, the rooms glowed with candlelight and the hum of anticipation. Alexander greeted them with careful courtesy, introducing Evelyn to a select gathering of guests, scholars, musicians, a few discreet ladies and gentlemen of rank. He treated her with the same deference as his most honored visitors, neither condescending nor effusive. After dinner, the guests gathered in the music room, where a pianoforte awaited. Evelyn took her place, her mother seated nearby, pride and anxiety written across her face. She began with a gentle nocturne, the notes shimmering in the candlelit hush. Conversation ceased as her music filled the room, aching, resilient, alive. Alexander watched from the shadows, his heart in his throat. He saw how the light caught her profile, how her hands shaped each phrase with care and longing. When she finished, the applause was genuine, the admiration unforced. Lord Colville leaned over to Alexander, murmuring, "You were right about her. She is remarkable." Alexander said nothing, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. He saw the flicker of relief in her smile, the way she scanned the room for her mother's approval. Later, as the guests mingled, Alexander found her alone by the terrace doors, gazing out into the night. "You play as if the world is listening, Miss Ashcombe," he said softly. She turned, her expression wary. "I play as if it might be my last chance to speak." He nodded, understanding. "I hope you will play again, for yourself, if not for us." She looked at him, searching for the catch, the hidden motive. "You are very kind, Mr. Ashford. I wonder if you are always so generous to strangers." His smile was gentle, tinged with sadness. "Not always, only when I wish they were not strangers." A faint flush colored her cheeks. She looked away, her voice steady. "It is late, sir. I must find my mother." He bowed, letting her go. But as she slipped away into the crowd, he felt hope kindle, a fragile, reckless thing. In the carriage ride home, Mrs. Ashcombe was effusive. "You played beautifully, my dear. And Mr. Ashford, what a considerate gentleman. I do hope he invites you again." Evelyn was silent, her mind swirling with questions. Who was Mr. Ashford, truly? Why did he look at her as if he saw something beyond music and poverty? And why, despite everything, did she wish to see him again? Outside, the night deepened, carrying secrets and promises in its velvet hush. Inside, two hearts, one guarded by pride, the other by secrets beat in uneasy harmony, each longing for something neither dared to name. Neither could know that their next meeting would change everything. The sun set in a blaze of rose and gold behind Ravenshire Hall, painting its ancient stone with fleeting warmth. The estate's grand entrance bustled with activity. Carriages rolled up the gravel drive. Footmen in livery hurried to and fro, and the air shimmered with expectation. Yet inside the private library, where velvet curtains shut out the world, the air was thick with something far more volatile. Evelyn stood near the hearth, back straight, every muscle taut with disbelief. Alexander, Mr. Ashford stood before her, no longer shielded by false names or casual anonymity. He was the Duke of Ravenshire, the man whose obsession with a portrait had become the talk of society, and the reason she now felt exposed, a living exhibit beneath the gaze of strangers. She stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are the Duke." He bowed his head, shame flickering in his eyes. "I am." "Evelyn, I swear I never meant to deceive you for cruelty or sport." Her hands trembled as she pressed them together. "Then why? Why the charade? Did you think it amusing to play at being someone else? To watch me dance for your entertainment, like a performer on a stage?" Alexander stepped forward. the plea in his voice unmistakable. No, never. I needed to know you, Evelyn, not as a duke, not as a collector of art, but as a man one who has been haunted by your likeness since the moment I saw it. I was afraid you would never speak to me if you knew the truth. I had to try. She flinched as if struck. You have made me into a spectacle, sir. Look at the invitations, the stares. Everyone is watching for your mysterious guest, the woman from the painting. I have become gossip. He reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand. I'm sorry. I have been selfish, but you must believe me. I searched for you not to expose you, but because you changed something in me. The woman in the portrait. She looked as if she had survived heartbreak and still stood proud. I have never seen such strength, such longing. Evelyn's anger flared, but the rawness in his voice gave her pause. She saw the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, the uncertainty that lived beneath his title. For a long moment, the silence between them was filled with all that could not be said. At last, she drew herself up, her dignity unmistakable. I will stay, Your Grace, but only for tonight's ball, and only if you treat me with respect, not as a curiosity, but as a guest in your home. Relief and gratitude washed over his face. You have my word, Lady Evelyn. You will have nothing but my respect. As twilight deepened, the great hall came alive with music and candlelight. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across silk gowns and polished boots, while the city's most influential families swept through the gilded doors. All eyes turned toward Alexander, their duke, and the mysterious young woman at his side. Evelyn's heart hammered beneath her gown as she descended the staircase, her arm lightly resting on Alexander's. She felt the weight of 100 stares, admiration, envy, speculation, all pressing upon her with suffocating force. Yet she kept her chin high, her composure unbroken. Lady Densmore, notorious for her sharp tongue, whispered behind her fan, "Is that not the girl from the Duke's painting? The resemblance is uncanny." Her companion replied, "Who is she, do you suppose? A countess in disguise? An actress?" The orchestra struck up a waltz, drawing guests onto the floor. Alexander turned to Evelyn, his voice gentle above the swell of strings. "Would you honor me with this dance?" She hesitated, memories of his deception still raw. But something in his gaze, earnest, vulnerable, softened her resolve. She placed her gloved hand in his, allowing herself to be led onto the parquet. As they moved together, the room seemed to blur and recede. Alexander's hand was steady at her waist. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. They danced in a silence, charged with everything unspoken, the ache of betrayal, the pull of longing, the uncertainty of what might come next. Alexander spoke softly, only for her. "You are braver than I ever imagined. I have lived my life by duty, by rules, never by feeling. You have undone all of that." She searched his face for mockery and found only sincerity. "You know nothing of my courage, Your Grace. I have done what I must. Survival is not the same as bravery." He shook his head, a small smile touching his lips. "Perhaps not, but you make me want to be braver myself." Their steps carried them through the center of the room, watched by jealous rivals and hopeful matchmakers alike. The tension between them was as palpable as the music, a longing both thrilling and fraught with risk. As the waltz ended, Alexander bowed low, his voice barely audible. "Thank you, Lady Evelyn, for trusting me, even a little." She dipped her head, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Do not mistake endurance for trust, Your Grace, but I am here." The orchestra launched into a livelier tune, and the crowd swept between them once more. All around, the whispers grew speculation, envy, admiration. Yet, for the briefest moment, Evelyn and Alexander had been alone, their fates suspended between anger and hope. In the shadows of the ballroom, beneath the glitter and the scrutiny, something new had begun to kindle a fragile understanding, a spark neither of them could ignore. But as the night deepened, both knew the world would not let them linger in that fragile peace for long. Dawn broke over Ravenshire Hall, pale and cold, the morning light struggling to pierce the heavy curtains. Inside, the air was thick with the residue of perfume and music, the memory of the previous night's ball lingering like a perfume gone sour. Evelyn awoke in her guest chamber, The echoes of whispered laughter and swirling silk still sharp in her mind. The grandeur of the night had faded, leaving only uncertainty in its wake. She sat at the dressing table, hands trembling as she twisted a handkerchief in her lap. Through the window, she watched carriages departing, guests drifting away in pairs and clusters, their voices rising in the brittle hush of scandal. She could almost hear the words already forming her name, the Duke's, entwined in speculation and envy. Her mother burst into the room, breathless and agitated, a scrap of paper clutched in her hand. "Evelyn, you must listen. Lady Densmore herself has written to Lady Chudley, and now everyone is talking. They say you enchanted the Duke, that you schemed to win his favor before all of society." Evelyn's heart contracted. "I did nothing but dance, Mamma. I have been as proper as I know how." Mrs. Ashcombe's eyes darted with panic. "Proper. Proper does not matter now. You have been seen. You have been remarked upon. If you do not secure the Duke's proposal, we are ruined. Your sisters, your reputation." Evelyn rose, her voice tight with suppressed pain. "I will not be traded like a prize in a market, not even for my family's sake. I will not force his hand." Her mother's face crumpled in despair. "You are too proud, Evelyn. That pride will be your undoing." But Evelyn only shook her head, the weight of shame and stubbornness heavy in her chest. "I would rather be ruined by honesty than saved by deceit." Elsewhere in the house, Alexander faced a different kind of reckoning. The Dowager Duchess, his mother, confronted him in his study, her jaw set and her eyes stormy with worry. "You must see what you have done, Alexander. The entire county is aflame with talk of your infatuation, of your reckless behavior. You have responsibilities. The dukedom cannot afford such scandal." Alexander's hands tightened around the edge of his desk. "I have not compromised her. I have done nothing dishonorable." "Nothing dishonorable?" The Duchess's voice rose. "A young woman of uncertain station, placed at the very center of your ball, dancing in your arms for all to see. What do you call it, if not indiscretion?" He met her gaze, stubborn and weary. "I call it an error of judgment, perhaps, but my feelings for her are not some passing folly." His mother's tone softened, but her words remained edged with steel. "You are the Duke. You must think of your name, your duty, your future. There are other women, better suited." He cut her off, voice low and resolute. "I care nothing for their suitability." The Duchess shook her head, despairing. "If you persist, you risk everything. You must distance yourself before you destroy her and yourself." While the halls buzzed with speculation, downstairs in the breakfast room, Lord Bertram nursed a cup of tea and a deeper bitterness. He watched the comings and goings with narrowed eyes, his lips curled in satisfaction. He had seen the admiration in the Duke's gaze, the envy in the faces of the other guests, and had scented opportunity as only a predator could. He spoke softly to Lady Densmore and her circle, letting his words drift like poison. "It is remarkable, is it not, how quickly some women forget their station. Lady Evelyn always did have ambitions beyond her means. And the Duke, such a pity he cannot see how she manipulates him. She is clever, that one. Desperation breeds cunning, I suppose." The ladies gasped and murmured, scandal growing in the retelling. By noon, the tale had spread from the servants' corridor to the grandest salons of Bath and London alike. Evelyn Ashcombe, fallen daughter of a ruined earl, had ensnared the Duke of Ravenshire with her beauty and her music. Evelyn's world narrowed to a single corridor, every glance a prick of accusation, every whisper a fresh wound. She could not bear the thought of facing Alexander. Not now, not when her very presence was a stain upon his name. She found her mother in the corridor, bags already half-packed. "We are leaving," she said simply. Miss Ashcombe's hands fluttered. "Evelyn, please. There is nothing for us here, Mamma. I will not be the reason for more gossip." Within the hour, they departed Ravenshire Hall in silence, the gravel crunching beneath the carriage wheels like the sound of something precious breaking. Bath was grey and damp when they returned, the city's familiar streets offering neither comfort nor escape. Evelyn resumed her lessons, her head held high, but everywhere she went, the eyes of the curious followed her. Some were sympathetic, most were not. She heard the whispers, ambition, disgrace, the girl who tried to snare a duke and failed. At home, Mrs. Ashcombe grew thin with anxiety. "If you had only said yes, Evelyn." Why do you insist on this stubborn pride? Evelyn answered quietly, because I would not be happy in a marriage built on scandal and resentment. I want to be chosen for myself, not for the avoidance of disgrace. But her resolve felt brittle. She lay awake at night, replaying the glittering nightmare of the ball, Alexander's hand on hers, the warmth of his gaze, the agony of betrayal and longing. She could not escape the memory, nor the certainty that she had lost something irretrievable. For Alexander, the days that followed were an agony of indecision. His household grew tense, the staff whispering behind closed doors, the Dowager Duchess watching him with silent reproach. Invitations arrived thick and fast, eligible heiresses, titled beauties, all eager to divert his attention from the scandal. He could not bear any of them. Lord Colville visited, eyes shrewd with concern. "You look hellish, Ravenshire. You cannot eat, cannot sleep." "Is she worth all this?" Alexander's answer was immediate, his voice raw. "She is worth everything, and I have lost her." Colville sighed. "If you truly care for her, you must act, before the world decides your fate for you." But Alexander hesitated. Duty and desire warred within him. He had been raised to think of legacy, of family, of reputation above all. Yet none of that mattered when he remembered Evelyn's face, her dignity, the pain in her eyes as she turned away from him. He sought her out in Bath, but each inquiry was met with closed doors or polite refusals. He wrote letters he could not send, rehearsed apologies he might never speak. Each day without her deepened his regret until fascination gave way to something deeper, more desperate, a love forged in the crucible of shame and longing. One evening, as Evelyn returned home from her lessons, she found Mrs. Beckwith waiting with a letter. "It came this afternoon, miss. From Ravenshire Hall, I believe." Evelyn took it, her hands trembling. The handwriting was unmistakable. She did not open it. She placed it on her desk, staring at the sealed envelope as if it might burn her fingers. Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes red-rimmed. "Will you not at least read it? Give him a chance to explain." Evelyn shook her head, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Some wounds are not so easily healed, Mama. I'm tired of being a pawn in other people's games." She watched the candlelight flicker across the letter, her heart heavy with longing and pride. In the darkness of his study, Alexander sat alone, the portrait of Evelyn staring down at him from the wall. He pressed his palms to his eyes, remembering the way she had looked at him, hurt, proud, unyielding. He knew then that he had not simply wounded her, he had wounded himself. No title, no estate could fill the emptiness she had left behind. He stood and crossed to the window, staring out at the rain-lashed gardens. The world he had always known, duty, reputation, ambition, seemed suddenly hollow. He wanted only one thing, the chance to make amends, to prove himself worthy not of her hand, but of her heart. In Bath, Evelyn folded the letter, still unopened, and placed it in her drawer. Her future was uncertain, her reputation in tatters. Yet somewhere beneath the pain, a stubborn spark remained, the hope that one day she might choose her own fate, not have it chosen for her. Far away, Alexander watched the night deepen, his resolve hardening with the darkness. He would not let this be their end. Neither of them knew what the next dawn would bring. The summer mists clung to Bath's crescents and terraces, softening the city's edges, but doing nothing to obscure the whispers that haunted Evelyn Ashcombe. Each day, she donned her plainest gown and set out with her music portfolio, chin lifted, eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the stares or the pointed silences that followed her through shop and street. She was not blind to her exile. Doors that had once opened to her were now closed, invitations vanished, her pupils withdrawn one by one with polite regrets. Her world, already diminished, seemed to shrink further with every passing week. At home, the air was thick with worry. Her mother, once quick to scold, now watched Evelyn with a brittle tenderness. Her sisters, restless and anxious, whispered about France and Italy, places where no one would know them, where the shadow of scandal might not reach. The hope of a fresh beginning was all that remained. One evening, Evelyn returned from a failed lesson, the coin purse on her wrist pitifully light. Mrs. Ashcombe sat by the window, a letter clutched in her hand. "It is from your uncle in Paris," her mother announced, voice trembling with cautious hope. "He offers us his hospitality. He believes you might find pupils there, or perhaps a position in a household." Evelyn stared at the letter, the reality of exile settling over her like a shroud. "So we are to leave England." "We must," her mother whispered. "There is nothing left for us here." Evelyn nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Far from Bath, Alexander's world had narrowed to a single, unwavering purpose. He had argued with his mother Stormy bitter words about duty and love, about reputation and happiness. The Dowager Duchess pleaded for sense, for self-preservation, but Alexander could not be swayed. He left Ravenshire Hall behind, the obligations of his rank a weight he could no longer carry, and set out for Bath. He arrived in the city, cloaked in rain and rumor, his presence both a scandal and a curiosity. Servants gawked, matrons whispered, but Alexander cared for none of it. He haunted the streets, made inquiries at the music shops, the boarding houses, the churches where he knew Evelyn had once played. Each refusal sharpened his determination. Each cold shoulder a reminder of how far pride and heartbreak had brought them both. At last, he found Mrs. Beckwith, the landlady, who relented after days of gentle insistence. "Miss Ashcombe is not at home, Your Grace. She is with a pupil on the Crescent, but I do not think she will be pleased to see you." "I must try," Alexander said quietly. "Please, madam." She sighed, pity softening her features. "She is a proud girl, Your Grace. Be kind." Evelyn was dismissing her pupil, hands still poised above the pianoforte, when the door opened and Alexander stood before her, tall, rain-damp, and exhausted. She froze, anger and longing warring in her chest. "Lady Evelyn," he began, voice raw, "I have come to beg your forgiveness." She drew herself up, every line of her body rigid with self-protection. "You should not have come. There is nothing left to say, Your Grace." He stepped forward, desperation in every gesture. "There is everything to say. I was a coward. I let you bear the brunt of gossip and shame, and I should have shielded you." Her voice was cold and brittle. "You could not have, not without making me a spectacle. I will not be pitied, Alexander. I will not be the price you pay for a guilty conscience." He flinched at the use of his name, but pressed on. "It is not guilt that brings me. It is love. I have come to ask you no, to beg you to marry me, not for duty, not to quell scandal, but because I cannot imagine my life without you." Evelyn's eyes glittered, tears threatening but unshed. "Do you think I have not dreamed of love, that I do not yearn for a life beyond survival? But how can I accept knowing I would be forever discussed, forever a warning, forever less than your equal in the eyes of the world?" He reached for her hand, voice breaking. "Let them talk. Let the world say what it will. I only want you." She pulled away, the pain in her voice unmistakable. "You say that now, but what of next year or 10 years hence? What of your family, your friends, your name? I will not be your burden or your regret." He stood silent, devastated, as she gathered her things, her composure slipping only for an instant. "You must leave, Your Grace. I cannot be what you want, not like this." He bowed his head, grief etched deep in every feature. "If you ever change your mind, if you ever need me, I will come." Without another word, he left her, the door closing between them with a soft, final click. That night, Evelyn wept quietly, her pride offering little comfort against the ache in her chest. Her mother found her, arms open, and Evelyn allowed herself to be held like a child. The next morning, the Ashcombes began to pack their meager possessions, the future uncertain but the decision made. They would leave for Paris within the week, hoping that a new land might offer what England had so cruelly withheld. Across the city, Alexander wandered the rain-dark streets, each step heavy with regret. He had offered his heart and been refused, not because his love was unworthy, but because the world they inhabited would never allow them peace. He returned to his lodgings, the fire burning low, and sat for hours with only memories for company. Evelyn spent her last days in Bath tying up loose ends, bidding farewell to the few friends who dared remain. She avoided the places she and Alexander had shared, the church where she had played, the gardens where they had walked. She steeled herself against hope, against the possibility of a future that could not be. On the morning of their departure, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the city wake. She pressed her hand to the glass, her heart torn between relief and sorrow, between what might have been and what must be. She did not see Alexander again, not then. But as the carriage rolled out of Bath, bound for the coast and then the continent, Evelyn could not help but wonder if the story between them was truly finished, or if fate would find a way to write them together once more. Florence shimmered in the golden haze of late afternoon, its rooftops terracotta and river Arno glinting beneath the sun. In the cool interior of a merchant's palazzo, Evelyn's voice drifted, clear and measured, as she guided her pupils through the intricacies of a Mozart duet. The windows stood open to the garden. A breeze stirred the sheet music and carried with it the distant bells of Santa Croce. In Italy, Evelyn had become someone new, Miss Ashcombe, English governess, respected for her talent and discretion, her past safely veiled by distance and time. She had grown thin but stronger, her eyes reflecting both the ache of loss and a new resilience. When her lessons ended, she wandered the city alone, seeking solace in the Uffizi's quiet halls or in the hush of dim chapels, where she studied the faces of Madonnas and saints, searching for some echo of her own endurance. The rhythm of her days, if modest, was her own. Morning lessons, afternoons at the pianoforte, evenings spent sketching or reading by lamplight. She wrote to her mother and sisters, now settled comfortably nearby, their fortunes stable at last. Sometimes she allowed herself to hope that happiness might be possible, though always at arm's length. Yet in quiet moments, memory returned with sharp clarity. Alexander's earnest eyes, the warmth of his hand, the ache of refusing what she most desired. She wondered if he thought of her, if England still whispered her name in tones of scandal or regret. Most days, she forced herself not to care. In London, Alexander haunted Ravensshire Hall, the portrait of Evelyn a silent witness to his unrest. He had tried to lose himself in duty estate accounts, correspondence, the endless demands of his title, but nothing soothed the hollow ache in his chest. He saw Evelyn everywhere, in the turn of a stranger's head, in the chords of a nocturne drifting through a salon, in the quiet, unyielding pride of a woman crossing the street. His mother urged him to move on. "You are still young, Alexander. You must marry, think of the dukedom, of heirs, of your future." He had no answer. He had given his heart once, and it was not his to reclaim. One evening, as autumn's chill seeped through the windows, a letter arrived from Paris. The envelope bore the strong, elegant hand of Monsieur Leclerc. Alexander opened it with trembling fingers. "Your Grace, I have recently encountered Miss Ashcombe in Florence, where she is engaged as a tutor to the daughters of Signor Belanti. She is well, though changed, and I believe her spirit remains unbroken. If you would see her again, you must come soon. Time, I think, is not on your side. Yours, A. Leclerc." Alexander's resolve was instant. He made preparations to leave England, ignoring the protests of his mother and the raised eyebrows of his peers. He cared little for scandal now. All that mattered was Florence, and the woman whose absence had remade his life. Florence greeted him with the scent of cypress and the clatter of carriage wheels on stone. Alexander went first to Leclerc's studio, tucked into a sunlit courtyard where vines curled over ancient brick. Leclerc received him with a measured smile, his eyes watchful. "You have come far, Your Grace." Alexander's reply was plain. "I had no choice. I have tried to forget her. I cannot." Leclerc nodded, sympathy and caution mingling in his expression. "She is changed, but not diminished. You must be gentle. She guards her heart as fiercely as ever. Where can I find her?" Leclerc gave him the address, then hesitated. "If you love her, do not let pride stand in your way." Evelyn was in the garden with her pupils when Alexander appeared at the wrought iron gate. She froze, unable to believe her eyes. The sunlight fell across his shoulders, gilding his hair, his face thinner but unchanged. For a long moment, neither spoke. He broke the silence, voice low and aching. "Evelyn." She gathered her composure, dismissing the girls with a gentle word. As the children scampered away, she turned to him, arms folded, every inch the proud woman she had fought to become. "What are you doing here, Alexander?" He stepped closer, hands open, gaze intent. "I have come to see you, to beg your forgiveness, to tell you that I love you still and always. I am prepared to face whatever the world may say, if only you will let me." She shook her head, pain flickering across her features. "You should not have come. Your presence here will only give people more to talk about. You risk everything. Your name, your family." He cut her off, voice urgent. "Let them talk. I care nothing for their approval. I would give up Ravenshire, my title, all of it, if only you would stand beside me." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "You say that now, in the flush of reunion. But what of the months and years to come? Will you not resent me when the invitations stop, when your friends turn away? I have seen what society can do. I will not be the reason you lose everything." He reached for her hand, desperate. "You are everything. Without you, all the rest is dust." She pulled away, trembling. "You do not understand. Here I am respected. I have built a life not grand but honest. I cannot bear to be your wife if it means living as a scandal, an object of pity." Alexander's voice broke. "I do not pity you. I admire you. I love you." Evelyn's resolve wavered, but she forced herself to speak the words she knew were right. "And I love you, Alexander, love you. But love is not always enough. I will not let you sacrifice yourself for me, not when I have only just learned to stand on my own." For a long moment they stood in silence, the Florentine sun warm on their faces, the distance between them more vast than ever. He bowed his head, tears in his eyes. "If you ever change your mind, I will be waiting, no matter how long it takes." She watched him go, her heart breaking anew, torn between hope and fear, between the promise of love and the certainty of loss. As the garden gate closed behind him, Evelyn wondered if she had chosen courage or only loneliness. The answer, she knew, was not yet written. Florence in high summer shimmered with beauty and threat. The city's golden domes glowed under a pitiless sun, and yet beneath the surface, fear crept through the winding alleys and silent piazzas. Word of cholera moved faster than the wind first whispered, then shouted, then screamed. The first deaths were hushed up, but within days the bells tolled relentlessly. Doors were marked with chalk, the healthy barricaded themselves indoors. Yet in a quiet quarter near Santa Croce, Evelyn Ashcombe did not retreat. She pressed cool cloths to burning brows, dosed water to cracked lips, and braced herself against the cries of the dying. She worked in makeshift wards alongside nuns and foreign doctors, her hands raw from lie and her heart bruised by helplessness. At night, she returned to the palazzo, collapsing in exhaustion, only to rise again at dawn. The city she had come to love was a place of suffering, and she could not turn away. One evening, as the bells rang for another soul lost, a familiar voice called from the end of the corridor. "Miss Ashcombe, Evelyn?" She turned, wiping her brow with a trembling hand. Alexander stood there, stripped of his usual elegance, his sleeves rolled, his hair damp, his face drawn with worry and resolve. She felt the old ache stir, mingled now with something deeper, astonishment, perhaps, or gratitude. "You should not be here," she said softly. Though her eyes contradicted her words, he shook his head, stubborn as ever. "I could not remain idle while others suffered. Let me help." She hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. There are too many who need us." Together, they worked side by side, day after day. Alexander learned to clean wounds, to carry water, to comfort the dying. At first, his presence drew stares. An English duke, humbling himself in the sick rooms of Florence. Yet soon, even the most skeptical nuns nodded their approval. He never shirked the filthiest tasks, never recoiled from suffering, never sought praise. Evelyn watched him, her doubts melting away with each act of quiet courage. One night, as they sat in the shadowy courtyard, Evelyn spoke, her voice hoarse. "You need not prove yourself to me, Alexander. You have done more than I ever thought possible." He gazed at her, exhaustion softening his features. "I do not do this for show, Evelyn. I do it because it must be done, and because it keeps me near you. She smiled faintly, a fragile peace blooming between them. You are changed. He shook his head. You changed me. I only wish I had realized sooner what mattered. A silence stretched between them, filled with the distant tolling of bells and the scent of lemons on the night air. As the weeks passed, the tide of illness began to ebb. The hospitals emptied, the markets reopened, and the city's heartbeat grew steady once more. But the memory of suffering lingered. Evelyn and Alexander, having endured the worst together, found themselves bound by a tenderness neither could deny. News of Alexander's selfless service spread through Florence, carried home by English travelers and letters from grateful families. In London, the tone's whispering changed in tone. No longer derision, but admiration and curiosity. The Duke of Ravenshire, once infamous for scandal, was now lauded for nobility and sacrifice. Evelyn's own reputation was transformed in the small circle of expatriates and Florentine society. She was no longer a fallen woman, but a heroine respected, admired, even beloved. One golden evening, as the city celebrated the end of the outbreak, Alexander found Evelyn in the hospital garden, tending a cluster of pale roses battered by the heat. He approached quietly. "Evelyn, may I speak with you?" She looked up, her eyes shining with fatigue and hope. "Of course." He drew a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I have loved you in England, and I have loved you in exile. I have loved you when you refused me, and when you needed me. I have nothing left to prove but this. I will love you, openly, for all the world to see, no matter the cost." He knelt in the dust, heedless of mud or scorn, and took her hand. "Will you marry me, Evelyn Ashcombe? Will you share your strength and your life with me from this day forward?" She stared at him, tears spilling silently. For the first time, she saw not a duke, not a rescuer, not a man driven by guilt or pride, but her equal, her companion, the one who had stood beside her in darkness. Her voice broke as she answered, "Yes, Alexander. Yes, with all my heart." He stood, gathering her into his arms as the bells of Florence rang out in jubilation. Around them, life returned to the city music, laughter, the promise of a new beginning. But even as they stood together, triumphant at last, they knew that the greatest test awaited: to build a life beyond the shadows of scandal and loss, to write a story worthy of their hard-won happiness. The morning of Evelyn and Alexander's wedding dawned with the quiet radiance of a Florentine spring. Sunlight spilled through the shutters of the modest chapel, painting the worn flagstones in gold. There were no jeweled carriages, no titles recited by heralds, only the scent of fresh roses and the gentle murmur of townsfolk gathering, some with bandaged arms or grateful eyes, each a testament to the lives the couple had touched during the city's darkest hours. Evelyn stood in a simple gown of ivory muslin, her hair braided with myrtle and a single pearl. Her mother wept softly beside her, pride and joy mingling on her cheeks. Alexander waited at the altar, his face unguarded, his gaze never leaving Evelyn as she walked toward him. Monsieur Leclerc, who had painted the portrait that had once separated and then reunited them, was among the guests. He offered Evelyn a discreet nod, a silent benediction from one who understood the price and promise of love. The priest spoke in gentle Italian, his words carrying easily in the sunlit hush. There were no grand vows, only earnest promises exchanged with trembling hands and shining eyes. "I give you my trust, my respect, my heart," Alexander said, voice steady and clear. Evelyn smiled, her reply soft but certain. "I give you my hope, my courage, and my love." When the rings were placed, when the vows were sealed, the townspeople erupted in applause. A handful of children scattered flower petals in the aisle. Outside, bells pealed from distant towers, mingling with the laughter and music that swept through the piazza. For the first time in many years, Evelyn felt herself wholly seen, not as the subject of scandal, nor the heroine of a crisis, but as a woman loved and chosen. They lingered in Florence for a fortnight, savoring the last hush before duty called them home. Alexander, relieved of the heavy mask of expectation, was transformed. He walked with Evelyn through olive groves and galleries, introducing her to the wonders of his childhood, and learning anew the language of wonder. Evelyn, too, was changed. She moved through the world with a serenity born of having survived so much, her laughter brighter, her spirit unburdened. When the time came to leave, the city gathered to see them off. Evelyn's pupils pressed gifts of wildflowers into her hands, while townsfolk offered blessings in halting English and swift Italian. As the carriage rolled away, she pressed her face to the window, heart full with gratitude and hope. England received them with cautious curiosity. Ravenshire Hall stood as it always had, proud and stately, but now it was transformed. The grand doors opened not only to lords and ladies, but also to villagers, to tenants, to the poor and dispossessed. Evelyn entered the hall as the new Duchess, her reputation restored not by the silence of scandal, but by the clarity of her actions and Alexander's unwavering devotion. The first days were a whirlwind of introductions and obligations. Society, ever fickle, found new stories to tell. Some whispered of the Duke's mad devotion, others of the Duchess's Italian heroism. There were those who could not forget the old gossip, but most found themselves won over by Evelyn's quiet dignity and Alexander's obvious pride in her. The portrait, the painting that had begun it all, hung in pride of place above the great staircase. Its subject, once anonymous and veiled in sorrow, was now celebrated. Guests paused before it, some recognizing the likeness, others only marveling at the soul in her eyes. Evelyn often lingered there, remembering the girl she had been and honoring the journey that had brought her home. Together, Evelyn and Alexander made Ravenshire Hall a place of purpose. They opened new schools on the estate, championed rights for tenant farmers, and sponsored hospitals and orphanages in both England and abroad. Evelyn's music filled the drawing rooms, but so did her laughter and her compassion. Alexander found in her not only a wife but a partner, one who challenged him, supported him, and stood by him in every cause they undertook. In private moments, they found joy in the small things. A walk at dusk through the misty park, a shared cup of tea, the delight of reading letters from Florence, where their friends still recalled their kindness. Their marriage was no fairy tale. It was forged in adversity, strengthened by mutual respect, and sustained by love that had defied convention and rumor alike. Sometimes, the old whispers resurfaced faint echoes of the scandal that had once threatened to destroy them. But Evelyn faced them with unshakable composure, and Alexander answered them with unwavering loyalty. "You do not regret it?" Evelyn would ask sometimes when the world seemed cold. He would take her hands, his answer always the same. "Not for a single moment. You are my heart, Evelyn. Everything else is noise." And she believed him, because she had seen the proof not in words, but in the constancy of his actions and the gentleness of his gaze. Years later, visitors to Ravenshire Hall would pause before the portrait, marveling at the story behind it. They would speak of the Duke and Duchess who had dared to love against the odds, who had rebuilt not only a reputation but a legacy of kindness and courage. But for Evelyn and Alexander, the true victory was quieter, a life lived together, each day a testament to their willingness to choose one another again and again, no matter what the world might say.